The jungle planet hummed with activity as humanity's counteroffensive surged into motion. From the makeshift TC command center, Captain Jake Lawson watched as soldiers and engineers moved with purpose, their determination a tangible force. Transmissions from Earth played in the background, announcing the revolution ignited by the TC team's discovery. Kinetic weaponry was back, reshaped for the modern age. Factories across the planet churned out artillery, Gatling guns, and ammunition, blending old-world reliability with advanced engineering. Jake's communicator crackled, and the voice of General Davis from Earth came through. "Captain, the first wave of reinforcements has arrived. You're leading the charge. Make it count." Jake turned to his team, his gaze steady and unwavering. "We've got one shot at this. Kyle, Victor, you're with me. We take that command base and show them what humans can do." Victor grinned, hefting his M2 Browning, which now gleamed with reinforced plating and modifications courtesy of Kyle's tinkering. "Been itching for round 2. Let's see if the Vexener learned their lesson." Kyle adjusted the alien power core strapped to his back, his hands jittery but precise as he checked the connections. "If this thing works, we'll do more than take out their base. We'll shake their entire empire." The TC battalion, armed with retrofitted tanks and hybrid weaponry, advanced through the jungle toward the towering spires of the Vexener command base. Old-school artillery pounded ahead of them, sending shockwaves rippling through the air. The jungle lit up with the flash of explosions, a brutal reminder of the escalating conflict. As they reached the base's perimeter, Jake signaled for the troops to halt. The Vexener defenses loomed before them, shimmering with advanced shielding and bristling with plasma cannons. Jake knelt beside Victor and Kyle, laying out the plan. "Kyle, you hack the shields. Victor, you and your old girl cover the ground team. Once we breach, it's all or nothing." Victor slapped the M2 affectionately. "You had me at cover." Kyle's fingers flew over his tablet, overriding the alien security protocols. A faint hum signaled the shield's disruption, and Jake gave the order. The battalion surged forward, unleashing a hail of ballistic firepower. Kinetic rounds hammered the Vexener defenses, ripping through barriers and armor alike. Gatling guns spat streams of lead, tearing into the alien ranks with ruthless efficiency. Inside the chaos, Victor's Browning roared, its rounds carving a path through the battlefield. "They keep underestimating us," he shouted over the cacophony. "And we keep proving them wrong." The Vexener, unprepared for humanity's newfound adaptability, faltered under the relentless assault. Their plasma weaponry, so dominant in prior skirmishes, struggled against the sheer physicality of the kinetic barrage. But just as victory seemed within reach, the ground trembled, and the sky darkened. A shadow loomed over the battlefield as the Vexener flagship descended. The Fortress-class warship was an imposing titan, its hull bristling with weapons, and its shields impervious to plasma or ballistic attacks. The TC troops hesitated, their initial triumph eclipsed by the overwhelming threat. Kyle stared at the behemoth, his face pale. "We don't have anything that can take that down." Jake's mind raced. He looked at the alien power core strapped to Kyle's back, then at Victor's M2. An idea, reckless, but their only chance, formed in his mind. "We make something that can." The plan was simple in concept but near impossible in execution. Using the alien power core, Kyle would overcharge the Browning, transforming it into a makeshift cannon capable of punching through the warship's shield generators. It was a gamble with no room for error. As the TC forces provided cover, Jake and his team sprinted toward the warship's landing zone. Plasma fire rained down around them, but they pressed on, their determination outweighing their fear. Kyle set up the core, his hands shaking as he connected it to the M2. "This is insane," he muttered. "Even by your standards, Jake." Victor smirked, his confidence unwavering. "Insanity's just another word for genius, when it works." Jake knelt beside them, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Then let's make it work." The moment the Browning roared to life, it was transformed. Its rounds, now supercharged with alien energy, tore through the warship's shields like paper. Sparks and flames erupted from the generators, and the ship shuddered violently as its defenses collapsed. "Now!" Jake shouted. The TC forces poured into the breach, storming the flagship with a mix of hybrid weapons and sheer determination. Inside the warship, the battle shifted to brutal close quarters. The Vexener elite, towering and heavily armored, met the humans with plasma blades and relentless precision. Jake fought with a ferocity born of desperation, every punch and shot a testament to humanity's refusal to yield. Victor's Browning, stripped of its improvised power core, still mowed down enemies with its relentless firepower. Kyle used his engineering skills to sabotage critical systems, turning the ship's advanced technology against itself. Sparks rained down as control panels exploded, and the ship's automated defenses faltered. As the team reached the Central Command hub, Jake planted the final explosives. "This is it," he said, his voice resolute. "We end it here." The team barely escaped as the ship imploded, its massive hull collapsing in on itself in a blinding cascade of fire and debris. From the jungle below, the TC forces watched as the once imposing flagship crumbled, a symbol of the Vexener's shattered dominance. In the aftermath, Jake used a salvaged Vexener transmitter to broadcast a message across the galaxy. His voice was calm, but his words carried the weight of 1,000 victories. To anyone watching, humanity isn't primitive. We're adaptable, relentless, and unforgiving. Underestimate us at your peril. Back at the camp, the mood was triumphant but subdued. Victor sat cleaning the Browning, his expression a mix of pride and exhaustion. This old girl saved the day. Again, Jake stood nearby, gazing at the stars. "We're not just survivors anymore," he said quietly. "We're conquerors." Above them, Earth's fleet began to assemble, a vast armada of hybrid weaponry and hardened resolve. The Vexener had been the first to challenge humanity. They wouldn't be the last. The jungle was alive with tension, every rustle and shadow hinting at unseen danger. Captain Jake Lawson crouched low behind a massive tree trunk, his sharp eyes scanning the underbrush for movement. Beside him, Victor Hayes knelt with the M2 Browning firmly in his grip, its barrel aimed toward the faint shimmer of distortion that betrayed the Vexener hunter's cloaked approach. "They're playing with us," Jake whispered, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Overconfident," Victor chuckled darkly. "Overconfident aliens make for great target practice." Before Jake could respond, the shimmer solidified into a Vexener soldier, its sleek armor reflecting the filtered sunlight. The alien stepped forward, a cruel smile visible through its translucent helmet. "Surrender, primitives," it hissed in accented English, its voice laced with mockery. "Your resistance is futile." Victor didn't wait for permission. He squeezed the Browning's trigger, and the weapon roared to life, its heavy rounds tearing through the jungle air. The Vexener's shield flared blue, struggling to repel the kinetic onslaught, before shattering like glass. The alien barely had time to register its failure before a .50 caliber bullet punched through its chest, sending it sprawling to the ground in a spray of sparks and ichor. The rest of the TC team froze, their disbelief palpable. The Vexener, for all their technological superiority, had fallen to a weapon nearly 3 centuries old. Jake's lips twitched into a faint smirk. Guess they didn't plan for good old-fashioned lead. The jungle erupted into chaos as more Vexener hunters decloaked, their plasma rifles lighting up the dense foliage with searing bolts of energy. The TC team scattered, using the terrain for cover, while Victor kept the Browning firing, its rhythmic thunder turning the once serene jungle into a battlefield. Kyle Donovan dove behind a fallen log, his engineering tools clattering as he landed. "Their shields can't handle the kinetic force," he shouted, his mind racing. "We can use that." Jake's voice cut through the cacophony. "Then let's use it. Donovan, see what tech we can salvage. Victor, keep that thing singing. We're not done yet." Victor grinned, his hand steady on the Browning's grips. "Wasn't planning on stopping, Cap." As Victor laid down suppressing fire, Jake regrouped with the rest of the team, his mind working through their limited options. The aliens were advancing in formation, their plasma fire forcing the TC to retreat deeper into the jungle. But their reliance on energy-based technology made them predictable, almost rigid in their approach. "Guerrilla tactics," Jake muttered, more to himself than anyone else. If they want to hunt us, let's give them a real hunt. Within minutes, the team was setting up improvised traps using whatever they could find. Kyle rigged EMP mines from salvaged alien tech, embedding them in the soft earth to disable the Vexenor's cloaking devices. Victor scavenged steel shards from the ship's wreckage, fashioning them into deadly spikes that they planted along narrow jungle paths. Even the terrain became a weapon, with fallen trees and vines reconfigured into primitive snares. By the time the Vexenor hunting party reached their position, the TC team was ready. Jake gave the signal, and the jungle exploded into controlled chaos. An EMP mine detonated, sending arcs of electricity crackling through the air and forcing several Vexenor soldiers out of their cloaked state. Victor opened fire, the Browning's heavy rounds tearing through exposed armor with merciless efficiency. A second wave of Vexenor advanced, but their formation collapsed as sharpened steel spikes shot upward from the undergrowth, impaling the unprepared soldiers. Kyle triggered a makeshift mortar, launching an EMP-charged shell that detonated mid-air, disrupting the targeting systems of the remaining hunters. Amid the chaos, Victor's voice rang out, equal parts exhilaration and defiance. "Who's primitive now, you shiny bastards?" Jake moved with precision, directing the team's firepower while taking down targets with his sidearm. Despite the overwhelming odds, his calm command kept the group focused. "Keep them guessing," he called out. "Never let them regroup." The final wave of Vexenor hunters advanced cautiously, their numbers still formidable despite the losses. One alien stepped forward, its weapon raised, when a booby-trapped tree swung down from above, its massive trunk slamming into the soldier and sending it sprawling. Victor whistled, impressed. "Nice touch, Cap." "Thank the jungle," Jake replied, reloading his pistol. "And don't get cocky. They'll adapt." But the Vexenor didn't get the chance. The team's traps and relentless assault whittled down their numbers until the last alien retreated, limping and desperate, into the dense foliage. Silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the heavy breathing of the TC team. Kyle collapsed onto a mossy rock, his face streaked with sweat and dirt. "I can't believe that worked." Victor slung the Browning over his shoulder, his grin as wide as ever. "Told you Betsy's got soul." Jake stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over the carnage. The jungle floor was littered with the remains of Vexenor soldiers, their once imposing armor reduced to scrap. He picked up a discarded alien communicator and activated it, the device crackling to life. From the other end, a Vexenor voice sneered, "Barbarians, your crude tactics mean nothing. You cannot win." Jake's smirk returned, this time sharper, more dangerous. He crushed the communicator under his boot and muttered, "They haven't seen barbaric yet." The team gathered their remaining supplies and moved deeper into the jungle, their victory hard-earned but far from final. For now, they had bought themselves time. And time, as Jake knew, was all they needed to turn the tide. The Terran Expeditionary Corps' frigate Resolute Horizon hovered in low orbit over the contested border world of Selva 3, its hull gleaming under the planet's twin suns. Inside the bridge, Captain Jake "Iron" Lawson stood with his arms crossed, his piercing eyes locked onto the holographic projection of the Vexenor Galactic Empire's fleet. Their ships, sleek and predatory, radiated an unsettling luminescence, a stark contrast to the rugged utilitarian design of the TC vessel. "We're outclassed," muttered Specialist Kyle Donovan, his voice tinged with both awe and dread. The young engineer adjusted his glasses nervously, his fingers hovering over the console. "Their plasma weapons alone could turn us into vapor." Captain Lawson didn't respond immediately, his jaw set like carved stone. The Vexenor delegation had sent a transmission only minutes earlier, their disdain for humanity evident in every word. The aliens referred to Earth as a quaint relic and dismissed the TC as a fossilized species stumbling through the cosmos. "Let them underestimate us," Lawson growled finally, his voice gravelly from years of barking orders. "We've dealt with arrogant bullies before." Standing behind him, Sergeant Victor Hayes snorted, hefting the battered M2 Browning machine gun he refused to part with. The weapon was an anomaly among the TC's sleek, plasma-based arsenal. To Victor, the old .50 caliber had more than history. It had soul. He slapped its worn barrel with a grin. They'll change their tune when they meet Betsy here. Betsy? Kyle arched an eyebrow. You've named that relic. Watch your mouth, kid, Victor shot back, his grin widening. This relic has taken down more targets than your fancy gadgets ever will. Before the banter could escalate, an alert blared through the bridge, and the hologram of the Vexener fleet shifted. Their ships formed an attack pattern, their intentions unmistakable. Captain, Donovan stammered, his hands trembling over the console. They're charging weapons. Lawson didn't flinch. Raise shields. Return transmission. The Vexener commander's image flickered onto the main screen. Towering and clad in ornate armor, the alien's disdainful gaze seemed to pierce through the distance between their vessels. You were warned to stay away from our borders, primitives. Let this serve as your final lesson. The transmission cut off before Lawson could respond. A heartbeat later, the resolute horizon shuddered violently as plasma bolts struck its shields. Donovan's console sparked, and warning lights flooded the bridge. Shields at 30%. Donovan shouted, panic creeping into his voice. Return fire. Lawson barked, gripping the edge of his chair. The TC's plasma cannons lit up the void, but their emerald bolts fizzled harmlessly against the Vexener shields. The alien ships closed in, their weapons primed for another volley. They're toying with us, Victor muttered, his usual bravado dimmed. He glanced at Lawson. We can't win this fight. Lawson's gaze darted between the deteriorating shield readouts and the holographic map. Then we don't fight. Helm, plot a course to the nearest escape vector. Prepare for atmospheric entry. The resolute horizon broke formation, its engines flaring as it dove toward Selva 3's dense jungle surface. Vexener ships gave chase, their plasma cannons carving fiery trails through the planet's upper atmosphere. With a deafening crash, the TC frigate plummeted through the canopy, its hull scraping against massive trees before skidding to a halt in a clearing. The silence that followed was oppressive, broken only by the hiss of escaping steam and the distant cries of alien wildlife. Inside the wrecked ship, Lawson and his crew struggled to regroup. Status report, Lawson demanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. Donovan coughed, waving away smoke as he checked his console. Engines are fried. Weapon systems offline. We're sitting ducks. Victor spat onto the floor, slinging Betsy over his shoulder. And the Vexener. Landing troops nearby, Donovan replied grimly. Hunters, by the look of their scans. Lawson surveyed the battered bridge, his crew's faces pale but resolute. We hold the line. Gather what supplies we can carry. We move out in 5. The jungle outside was a labyrinth of towering trees and tangled vines, its humid air thick with the scent of decay. The team moved cautiously, their plasma rifles at the ready. Donovan scanned the surroundings nervously, his engineering tools clinking against his belt. You sure about this, Cap? Victor asked, his voice low. We're out of our league here. We've faced worse odds, Lawson replied without hesitation. We'll improvise. As if to mock his resolve, a Vexener patrol appeared on the ridge above them, their sleek armor glinting in the filtered sunlight. The aliens raised their weapons, but before the TC team could react, an ancient crate, half buried in the undergrowth, caught Victor's eye. What the hell is that? Donovan asked as Victor pried the crate open. Inside, gleaming faintly despite decades of neglect, lay a collection of 20th century firearms. M16 rifles, Colt 1911 pistols, and at the center, another M2 Browning, its metal as imposing as ever. Looks like history just saved our asses, Victor said, his grin returning. He hefted the second Browning with reverence, inspecting it for functionality. These babies were made to last. Lawson frowned, skepticism evident. You think those antiques can stand up to alien tech? Victor mounted the Browning onto a makeshift tripod he fashioned from scavenged parts. I don't think, Cap. I know. The Vexener hunters closed in, their plasma rifles glowing ominously. Victor loaded the Browning, its mechanism clicking with a satisfying finality. He took aim and shouted, Come and get some, you shiny bastards. The first alien stepped into the clearing, its weapon raised. Victor pulled the trigger. and the jungle erupted in a deafening roar. The Browning's .50 caliber rounds tore through the Vexenor's shields, their once impervious armor splintering under the sheer kinetic force. The rest of the team watched in stunned silence as Victor unleashed a torrent of firepower, the Browning's muzzle flashing like a defiant beacon. For the first time, the Vexenor faltered, their arrogance giving way to confusion and fear. "Primitive, huh?" Victor shouted over the chaos, his grin feral. "Let's see how you like a history lesson." As the last of the Vexenor retreated into the jungle, Lawson placed a hand on Victor's shoulder, his expression a mix of disbelief and newfound respect. "Looks like your relic just changed the game," Lawson admitted. Victor smirked, patting the Browning affectionately. "Told you, Betsy's got soul." For the first time since the crash, hope flickered among the TC team. They weren't out of the woods yet, but with ingenuity, grit, and a little help from the past, they just might survive.